to it and shoot for the sky.
In the world of professional wrestling, it is not unheard of for wrestlers to wrestle under different gimmicks or names. For some wrestlers, it's worked very well, and for others, it was a career killer. And in this video, we look at 10 people who played multiple characters in WWE. Number 1, Glenn Jacobs. Isaac Yankem DDS, Fake Diesel, and Kane. From an evil dentist to an imposter of a former top guy to a crazed man in a mask who has taken it off and on so many times, Glenn Jacobs has truly changed more than anyone in wrestling. He started out as Isaac Yankem in 1995 as a dentist brought in by heel Jerry Lawler to mainly fight Bret the Hitman Hart. It was one of those ridiculous gimmicks that were too common in the mid 1990s in WWE that was never going to work, yet they tried it anyway. What was unique about the character was he had a full head of hair and yellow teeth, which made it funny because a dentist with bad teeth is hypocritical. But that character wouldn't last long, and when WWE lost Diesel in the spring of 1996, it was a significant loss to them because they were losing one of their major players for the company. For whatever reason, though, Vince McMahon thought it was a smart idea to bring in a fake Diesel character played by Jacobs. Although he looked nothing like Yankem or Diesel in this matter, if you didn't know backstage happenings in wrestling, you wouldn't even know that this was the same guy that played Yankem. But that character wouldn't last long either, and by late 1997, Kane would debut. He was under a mask with his quote-unquote father, Paul Bear, and was thrown into the main event position immediately as the brother of The Undertaker. It was a great role for him, and he was one of WWE's longest tenured employees ever, and wrestled into his late 40s nearly every week on TV. When he took the mask off for the first time in 2003, it was a big deal, and even got bigger ratings. Most people like him better with the mask on, but his promos without the mask was even better, especially in 2010 as the top heel on SmackDown. We've seen Kane so many times in so many different roles over the years. He's been masked and unmasked so many times it's hard to keep track, and he's even been corporate Kane at times. All three of his looks are different. Hey, give him credit for pulling it off. He's one of WWE's better actors, and it's why he's been able to last this long. He's now retired from WWE and is a WWE Hall of Famer. He now serves as mayor of Knoxville, Tennessee. Number 2, Matt Bloom. Albert, A-Train, and Tensai. This is a complicated one because the big man with the bald head has gone through so many gimmicks in his career. He started out as Prince Albert in 1999, which is a term for genital piercing. Yeah, that's right. They named the guy after genital piercing. He was brought in as a tattoo artist for draws. It was a gimmick that really didn't last long, and he shortened his name to just Albert. He then became part of the tag team T&A with Test, managed by Trish Stratus. And when that tag team was over, he was put together with Scotty 2 Hotty. And after his tag team run with Scotty 2 Hotty was over, he also joined the faction X Factor with X-Pac and Just Incredible, which would just last a little under a year. But in 2002, he became a heel and was known as A-Train. It was another reboot for his character, which, with the idea being that he was able to be a serious heel again. And you might recall he teamed with The Big Show in a losing effort against The Undertaker at WrestleMania 19 in 2003. It was one of the most high-profile moments of his career, although it wasn't a main level push. But in 2004, he would leave WWE, and he worked in New Japan from 2005 to 2012. In the spring of 2012, he would return to WWE as Lord Tensai. It was a completely different look for him since he had more tattoos on his upper body and even Japanese lettering across his face. Nobody looked like him. and he received a good push immediately, with wins over the likes of John Cena and CM Punk. But the gimmick didn't work. The lower part was dropped from his name, and he just became Tensai. And at one point, he even became a tag team with Brodus Clay, dancing to the ring and more of a comedy skit. After all those changes, he retired from in-ring competition, and he has now found a home in NXT as commentator and trainer named Jason Albert. Number 3, Mick Foley. Cactus Jack, Dude Love, and Mankind. When discussing multiple personalities in WWE, Mick Foley's name will always be mentioned by default. He portrayed three different characters during his career, with his performance in the 1998 Royal Rumble serving as the best example of his talent. Apart from being Mick Foley, the hardcore legend, his famous characters include Cactus Jack, the unforgiving physical brawler, Mankind, the mentally deranged superstar, and Dude Love, the fun-loving hippie. Foley has given fans numerous memories with his three alter egos and has taken his rightful place in the WWE Hall of Fame. But the best part about Mick Foley and all three of his alter egos is that Mick Foley has had countless moments with each one. Cactus Jack was more developed in the hardcore style wrestling, and Cactus Jack did wrestle in WCW and ECW. Do Love was more of a character that Mick Foley created in his teen years, and Mankind was a product of WWE. But Mick Foley was probably the only guy you could find who could take three different characters and put them on the same show and pull it all off. And whether it was Mankind facing off against Undertaker, Cactus Jack against Triple H, or Dude Love teaming up with Stone Cold Steve Austin. The point is you never knew which character was going to show up. And in the Attitude Era, this was definitely a highlight of the show. If you really want to know what helped WWE win the Monday Night Wars, Mick Foley and all three of his alter egos played a good part in that. Number 4, Charles Wright. Papa Shango, the Godfather, and the Good Father. Papa Shango was one of those cheesy gimmicks in the early 1990s that seemed to be a common thing in WWE. The character had a very little chance of succeeding, yet he was out there for a few years getting involved in major feuds with some big names. He was a voodoo man that put curses on his adversaries. It was a gimmick that was truly out there and not something fans were really entertained by. The one positive thing about Shango was his face was painted so you couldn't see his facial features. That allowed him to return as the Supreme Fighting Machine, when he also adopted the name Mustafa to make it sound even tougher. But that was his character from 1994 to 1997, when he was a heel with Ted DiBiase, and also when he joined the Nation of Domination. His most memorable role was the Godfather. It was a character that was a pimp. Since WWE was trying to push the envelope between 1998 and 2000, the character fit well because fans wanted to see the hot women that came to the ring with him, known as the Hoe Train. So the Godfather brought these women out and fans cheered for him. It's not like WWE tried to hide the fact that this character was a pimp and the women were his prostitutes. But in 2001, he would be known as the Good Father as a part of the Right to Censor faction. And during this time with the Right to Censor, he was no longer the lovable pimp with the hoe train. Matter of fact, he was the opposite of that. But the character he was known for the most was being the Godfather. And in 2016, he would join the WWE Hall of Fame. Number 5, Terry Bollea, Hulk Hogan, Hollywood Hogan, and Mr. America. In the 80s and early 90s, Hulk Hogan was WWE's biggest star, and WWE built its success and future on the back of Hulk Hogan. During his time in WWF, now WWE, in the 80s and 90s, he did everything from world titles to Royal Rumble victories. He also defeated all the names and stars put in front of him. He sold out countless WWE events and main evented multiple WrestleManias. But Hogan would leave WWE, and before we knew it, he joined the WCW and would eventually turn heel and start the NWO. But after joining the NWO faction, he was no longer the red and yellow Hulkster. He was the black and white Hollywood Hogan. He'd return in 2002 to WWE with Kevin Nash and Scott Hall as Hollywood Hogan and the NWO. This was the first time we ever saw a heel Hogan in WWE. He'd wrestled for a few years as Hulk Hogan against the likes of Brock Lesnar, Triple H, and Chris Jericho and other names. But Hogan would become Mr. America on May 1st, 2003 episode of SmackDown. And he would feud with Mr. McMahon and continue to deny being Hulk Hogan in disguise, despite using the same theme song and mannerisms. The character made his final appearance on the July 3rd, 2003 episode of SmackDown before Hogan left WWE over creative differences in real life. Since then, Hogan has made multiple returns to WWE, but as Hulk Hogan. Nowadays, Hogan gets a mixed response and reviews due to the past issues and demons that he's had. As he may not be the hero to all that he once was, he's still the Hulkster and will always be known as Hulk Hogan to fans worldwide. And some of Hulkster's biggest moments in wrestling is when he faced Andre the Giant at WrestleMania 3. He retained the WWE title in a match where the slam heard around the world took place. He is also a two-time WWE Hall of Famer as he entered the Hall of Fame once in 2005 and again in 2020. He is a 14-time world champion, being a six-time WWE champion, a seven-time WCW champion, and a one-time New Japan Pro Wrestling IWGP Heavyweight Champion. Number 6, Sean Waltman. 123 Kid, MX Pac. Sean Waltman has played a number of characters with even more names, but his WWE ones are the ones we're going to focus on in this video. In WCW, he was known as Six, but that wasn't in WWE. In WWE, he played two out of his three most memorable gimmicks. One was the 123 Kid in the mid 90s and X-Pac in the late 90s and early 2000s. In the early and mid 90s, WWE was in a cartoonist stage, and he was the rookie who was talented but never going to rise to much. It wasn't until he left for WCW and only to return in the late 90s as X-Pac where he got his big break. In his last run for WWE, he was a member of DX. He ran his own faction called the X Factor and joined the NWO with Shawn Michaels, Big Show, Booker T, and Kevin Nash. He'd also hold multiple titles in his last run from late 90s to early 2000s. He'd hold World Tag Team title gold, WWE Light Heavyweight gold, WCW Cruiserweight gold, and even the European Championship. Nearly 20 years after his most memorable run with the company, he became a two-time WWE Hall of Famer, once with DX and once with the NWO. Some would say his career in and outside of WWE is worthy of a solo Hall of Fame induction itself. But he got into the Hall of Fame twice and had a great WWE career. He usually will make a few appearances for WWE as X-Pac or for D-Generation X reunions and even legend segments, and he always is welcomed by the fans. We last saw him in WWE on January 6, 2025 on the WWE Raw premiere on Netflix, as he was in the crowd with multiple legends and he got a pretty good pop from the fans, proving they not only remember him, but appreciate him as well. Number 7, Owen Hart. Owen Hart and the Blue Blazer. Owen Hart was a wrestler in the 90s and came out of the famous Hart family, his dad being Stu Hart and his brother being Bret Hart. He is mainly known for his real name, Owen Hart, in the WWE. From his time being in groups like the Hart Foundation and Nation of Domination, continuing with the likes of Jeff Jarrett, Yokozuna, and British Bulldog, whom all three he held tag team titles with. He also portrayed another character named the Blue Blazer. Blue Blazer was a superhero gimmick Owen played, but unfortunately, Owen would pass away in 1999 at Over the Edge pay-per-view after an accidental fall in the rafters. He was playing the Blue Blazer character at that time. WWE would dedicate the next night's episode of Monday Night Raw to his memory, dropping all Blue Blazer mentions and focusings, and just focused on the real life Owen Hart who died under the mask. Ever since Owen's tragic death, he's had a WWE DVD release and has been mentioned in a few cases, but the Blue Blazer character and gimmick has never been brought up or mentioned since that horrific day. Since then, WWE and Owen's wife Martha have not been on good terms, and due to their bridges never mending together again, we unfortunately have not seen any official WWE Owen Hart merchandise, such as action figures, t shirts, or video game appearances. And it's almost certain that we will never see Owen in the WWE Hall of Fame either. With WWE under new management and ran under the Triple H umbrella, fans hope that the game can one day work out something with Owen's widow, Martha, and finally give Owen the induction, respect, and honor he deserves. Although some disagree with Martha Hart for not wanting to let WWE use his likeness or name, it's hard not to see her point of view, as she is the one who lost a husband and father to her kids that day. No one else can understand exactly what she went through and felt, and may still feel to this very day. But Owen did wrestle under two different gimmicks and names, and if anything, this mention in this video is kind of a memorable mention to his name and his memories alive out of respect for Owen himself. Number 8, Kevin Nash. Diesel and Kevin Nash. In the 90s, Kevin Nash wrestled in WWE as Diesel. Diesel was the bodyguard for Shawn Michaels and eventually became a big name in his own right. He even became a tag team champion, intercontinental champion, and even a WWE World Heavyweight Champion in the late 90s. He was over with the fans and made a huge name for himself. But in the 90s, he would leave WWE for WCW. WCW offered Nash a better deal with a 3-year guaranteed contract worth millions of dollars, in which WWE could not match at the time. And the deal also had fewer dates than what he was wrestling in WWE. When he arrived in WCW, he would go by his real life name, Kevin Nash, and would eventually join Scott Hall and Hulk Hogan in creating the NWO faction, which is known nowadays in 2025 as one of the best stables in wrestling history. In 2002, Nash, along with Hall and Hogan, would reemerge in WWE as the NWO. This time in WWE, he was known as Kevin Nash, and he'd wrestle off and on in the WWE for the next few years after the NWO gimmick and run was over. But after leaving WWE, he'd go to TNA for a few years, but he'd end up in WWE once more years later. His last big match in the WWE was in 2011 at WWE TLC against Triple H in a sledgehammer ladder match. He also had a few Royal Rumble surprise entrants as Kevin Nash and Diesel too. He was inducted into the WWE Hall of Fame twice, once in 2015 as Diesel and once in 2020 as part of the NWO faction as well. Nash is one of those guys that you can watch matches wrestled as both Diesel and Kevin Nash and be entertained by, and that earns a place on this list, no doubt. Number 9, Scott Hall. Razor Ramon and Scott Hall. In the 90s, Scott Hall would wrestle for WWE as Razor Ramon. As Razor Ramon, he had success as an Intercontinental Champion and a top mid-card wrestler. He competed in some great matches with the likes of Shawn Michaels and other future legends. And as good as he had it in WWE, just like his friend Kevin Nash, WCW came knocking at his door with a better deal, offering more money and less dates, and promises to be a bigger star than what he was in WWE. In WCW, he'd take his gimmick and go by his real name, Scott Hall. He joined Nash and Hulk Hogan in the famous faction, the NWO. Hall would make his way back to WWE in 2002 alongside Nash and Hogan in the NWO faction and as Scott Hall this time. His most noticeable match since his return was against Stone Cold Steve Austin at WrestleMania 18, in which Austin would win. Eventually, though, his time with WWE would come to an end after demons with substance abuse. He'd make some other wrestling memories after in TNA and some other places, but by that time, he was a shell of a guy everyone knew him as. His best years were behind him, and it was obvious. In 2013, he worked hard on his sobriety and even earned WWE's ultimate respect and honor when getting his solo WWE Hall of Fame induction in 2014 as Razor Ramon, and again in 2020 as Scott Hall as part of the NWO faction. Unfortunately, Hall would pass away in March 2022 due to a series of heart attacks and blood clots he developed following a planned hip surgery. He was 63 years old. The man had his demons, and there's no denying it. But it's hard to deny what he's done for the wrestling business as both Razor Ramon and Scott Hall. And because he was able not only to wrestle as two different characters and two different names, but also have major success with both two, that earns him a forever place on this list. Number 10, Steve Austin, the ringmaster and Stone Cold Steve Austin. In 1995, Austin debuted in the WWE as the ringmaster and was managed by the Million Dollar Man Ted DiBiase. He'd go by the ringmaster until March 1996. He dropped the name entirely and adopted the Stone Cold Steve Austin naming character after winning the 1996 King of the Ring tournament and giving his iconic Austin 316 speech. Austin showed us in ECW prior to his WWE debut that he could cut a promo and be a character worth investing in. The Ringmaster character just wasn't the money making gimmick WWE thought it would be. And it wasn't until WWE let Stone Cold Steve Austin be himself and cut loose that he was able to be that guy they wanted, and some. In WWE, they needed someone to take the WWE ball and carry it into the future, just like Hulk Hogan was in WWE in the 80s and early 90s. And just like Hogan before him, Austin was the face of WWE from about 1996 all the way up to 2003. In 2003, he wrestled his last match against The Rock at WrestleMania 19 in a losing effort and would retire afterwards. He'd be inducted into the WWE Hall of Fame in 2009. But after 19 years since his retirement at WrestleMania 38 in 2022, he'd wrestled his last match against Kevin Owens and win in what was his official last match ever. Stone Cold is always welcome back for special appearances and legendary moments. As for wrestling, we've probably seen the last of that from the Rattlesnake. The reason Austin gets this spot on the list and we save the best for last is because he wrestled under two different names and gimmicks in the WWE and really did create something from nothing. The Ringmaster gimmick wasn't popular and wasn't going to be what Stone Cold Steve Austin was. It all just goes to show that a simple name change and tweak of changes can do a lot for a wrestler. To go from something not promising to something revolutionary and iconic, that's what Stone Cold is all about. That was our list. If you can think of any other wrestlers that played multiple characters in WWE, let us know in the comments section. Until we meet again, this is Ring Post Daily Podcast. Follow us on YouTube and Facebook, and happy wrestling.